Good morning, friends. My name is Adam Kirtley and I serve as the chaplain at Whitman College and previously had the great honor of serving this congregation. It has been my pleasure to have been invited to consider this week's message while Pastor Nathaniel is taking some much-deserved time for restoration. One of the silver linings of our family's COVID response has been an increase in the number of dinners that we've been able to share together. My wife, Jen, is a remarkable chef and she's relished the opportunity to prepare amazing meals featuring fresh local ingredients. She says it's part of how she shows her love for us. And the conversation at the table is by and large interesting and funny. Like all families though, we're working stuff out. We're mitigating hurts from time to time. We're navigating some logistics, but mostly the conversations are a delight, and I consider myself to be so lucky to have dinner with these people every night. I'll admit though, that dinner time hasn't always been so pleasant. When they were younger, my children were picky. Actually, picky might be a better word for where they are now. As little kids, picky didn't really do justice to our reality. Food strike might be more apt. I believe Jesus may have once said, "A child cannot live on bread and cheese alone," but they tried. And it wasn't for a lack of effort on their parents' part. Their plates would come chock full of healthy options presented in the most whimsical and appealing ways possible. But inevitably, these two beautiful daughters of mine would take one quick look at their plate and immediately check out the other's plate. From a remarkably early age, when they could barely talk, let alone do higher math, I swear they had the ability to instantaneously calculate the number of peas on their plate relative to the number of peas on their sister's plate, or the number of melty chocolate chips in their cookie relative to their sister's. An impassioned pleas for justice would soon follow. Jen finally instituted a family rule. The only reason, she said, that we should ever look at anyone's plate is to make sure that they have enough to eat. The only reason that we should ever look at anyone's plate is to make sure that they have enough to eat. Friends, look at where we are right now in this country. I think it is a simple step to apply the plate rule to broader systems of justice in our society. And we must be careful about how we articulate issues related to race and racism. We progressive, liberal white folks best not say that racism seems really bad right now. Overt racist rhetoric has certainly been given a bullhorn, to be sure, but we are reminded that navigating racist spaces is absolutely nothing new to communities of color. And the fact that it does seem new to some of us means at the very least, I have been an unwitting participant in systems designed to protect my status and my power. In other words, I have been able to be racist without knowing that I was racist. And the call to anti-racism is, of course, the call to identify and dismantle those systems. We'll not untie this knot in the next few minutes, but given the fact that our presidential election is just 2 months away, it seems timely and appropriate to be reminded of part of what we see today is the legacy of 50-year-old political maneuverings. Following the peak of civil rights activity in the South in the 1960s, Richard Nixon's presidential bid deployed what became known as the Southern Strategy. The idea was to capitalize on the racial divisions that were flaring up in the South. Effectively, they said to white Southern voters, check out their plates. They say they should have more on their plates, which means you'll have less on yours. Human beings are deeply motivated by threats of scarcity, oftentimes even when they live in abundance. I believe it is part of the knot of racism in our country. I believe it's folded into environmental policies. I believe that it rears its head in any institution or organization that divvies up its work by divisions. And I'm looking at you, higher education. I fear that we may see the unsavory sides of our nature when it comes to distribute a vaccine in the face of this pandemic. Far too often the questions will be, do they have more than I have? And do I have what I deserve? The consequence is inevitably conflict. The gospel calls us, though, to consider justice not as retribution, but as distribution. Distributive justice asks, is there enough to go around, and do you have enough to be okay? Simple, right? Our reading from Matthew this morning addresses conflict within community. To find the application of this text on our lives requires us to consider the context in which it was written. The early church was fragile, and they were working things out. Much of the gospel narratives, though, point to extraordinary moments of transfiguration, miracles, and resurrection. I think it's sort of refreshing to be presented with something remarkably mundane, human. And the steps outlined in this morning's reading point above all else to a tenacious march toward restoration, toward making a relationship whole. That takes work. Looking at your sister's plate only to make sure that she has enough to eat is much easier said than done. We'll frequently not get it right, and we'll not move the needle if we can't extend grace to others along the way. But this is the call on our lives. This is the call on this community of faith, and I'm grateful to be journeying with you. Amen.